All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and I've been going over this series of articles from Microsoft.com on ASP.NET MVC Overview Getting Started. And there's 11 articles in the series. I've gone through getting started, adding a controller, adding a view, adding a model, creating a connection string and working with SQL Server, local DB, accessing your model's data from a controller, examining the edit methods in edit view, adding search, and we just finished adding a new field. So we're up to adding validation. All right, I'm just going to put it right here. So we're up to Article 10 of 11. All right, in this section, as mentioned, you'll add validation logic to the movie model, and you'll ensure that the validation rules are enforced anytime a user attempts to create or edit a movie using the application. So, one of the first things mentioned here on page 1 says one of the core design tenets of ASP.NET MVC, and really it's one of the core tenets of any programming language, is whenever possible, is dry. Do not repeat yourself. In other words, if it's possible, if you're putting the same code in more than one area, you should try to eliminate that and put it in a centralized area where it can be used over and over again. I mean, that's why you write functions or methods to begin with in programming. ASP.NET MVC encourages you to specify functionality or behavior only once, and then have it reflected everywhere in the application. This reduces the amount of code you need to write and makes the code you do write less error-prone and easier to maintain. The validation support provided by ASP.NET MVC and Entity Code First is a great example of the dry principle in action. You can declaratively specify validation rules in one place, that being in the model class, and the rules are enforced everywhere in the application. So we're going to see now how indeed that is done. We'll begin by making some validation logic or adding some to the movie class. All right, so again, I'm just going to follow the steps as they're shown here. So let me get back to the program, which is still running, so I'm stopping the run. And we want to go in, I'm going to close everything that I have open, so I just have open what I indeed need to have open. This was all the stuff I changed in the last set. This is the movies.cs file, and actually I don't think I'm going to need this migration anymore. I can always open it back up if I do. So, all right. So, open the movies.cs file. Notice the system.component.data annotations namespace right there does not contain system.web. Data annotations provide a built-in set of validation attributes that you can apply declaratively to any class or property. Now we are to update the movie class to take advantage of the built-in required string length, regular expression, and range validation attributes. So it says we want to replace the movie class that we currently see here, right here, with what is shown in the book, or in our article, I should say, right here. All right, so I'm going to do that, but I'm going to clean it up when I get done. So let's copy. There's a few changes that I'm going to have to make, I can already tell. As always, to be safe, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to comment this out rather than just removing it. And I would always suggest that you do the same thing. All right, so first, that looks fine, but I can put one blank space, but that should be plenty to put in here. All right, now I want to change this back to mm-dd-YYYY because I don't know why they've got it that way, but that's fine. So let's take it from the top, shall we? We've got our ID. The string length attribute that you see right there on your screen sets the maximum length of the string, and it sets this limitation on the database. Therefore, the schema is going to end up changing. So they want us to right mouse click on the movies table in the Server Explorer and I can never figure out how to find this, but let's right mouse click, let's try it in here. That isn't good. I went through this before and not sure what the problem is, but I think I had to go in and add an SQL server. I believe that's what I did, but I could be wrong. All right. And this was the one I wanted to add. Now, knowing my luck, okay, and the database name in there, it's got default. Does it let me enter anything good? This will be movies, if I'm doing this right. Now, if it gives me an error, of course, I've done it incorrectly. Boy. Okay, so let's cancel that. Let's try it again. Right mouse click. Let's go back here. All right, this will be local. Should be here. I would think that's everything, and I would think that's the right connection too in movies. .mdf. I would think that's right. Cannot open that database. Login failed. This isn't good. Well, hopefully that did it. I don't know if I have or not. I've got the model in there, but I don't see the database. So it's recognizing something, it's just not recognizing what I want it to recognize. Local, version 11. I don't know if it's there. I was hoping there'd be one in there called movies. Because it might be one of these and I don't know which one then it is. All right, hopefully I chose the right one. I've got a 50% chance of being right. So I'm going to go to Open Table Definition. Let's see if this has ratings in it. If it doesn't, I'm going to go back and choose the other one. It has a rating. That's good. So I'm opening the table definition. Hopefully it's going to open. There it is. In the image above, it says here, you can see that these are set to n varchar max. We will use migrations to update the schema. Build the solution. Should be able to close that. So build the solution. Then open back up the package manager. Okay, I shouldn't have closed it. That's fine. And enter the following commands. Add-migration space data annotations. And once that runs, update hyphen database. And it says here, when this command finishes, Visual Studio opens the class file that defines the yet newer DB migration derived class with the name specified of data annotations. You can see that if you look up here. And in the up method, I don't know what that means, you can see the code that updates the schema constraints. That is the up method right here. So that says that's what we were doing. The genre field is no longer nullable. That is, you must enter a value. The rating field has a maximum size of 5. And the title has a maximum size or length of 60. The minimum of 3 on the title, which I don't see on mine, and the range on price did not create schema changes, so they're not shown. Good. All right. The string fields show the new limits, and the genre is no longer clicked as nullable. So if we go back to movies here and go back and open our definition as we did before, notice that is now 60, and the nullable that was for genre has been taken off. The validation attributes specify behavior that you want to enforce on the model properties they are applied to. The required and minimum length attributes indicate that a property must have a value, but nothing prevents a user from entering white space to satisfy this validation. The regular expression attribute is used to limit what characters can be input. In the code above, genre and rating must use only letters, white space, in other words, white space numbers, and special characters are not allowed. The range attribute constrains a value to be within a certain range. The string length attribute lets you set the maximum length of a string property and optionally its minimal length. Value types such as decimal, int, float, those numeric types, and the date time type are inherently required and don't need this required attribute. Code first ensures that the validation rules specified on the model class are enforced before the database attempts to save the changes. All right, and they give an example that throws a thing because some of the required properties are missing. So when you look, this is the example in here with Gone with the Wind. Right there. And as you can see, it's got a title, but it does not have the required genre, for example. Okay? Having validation rules automatically enforced by the .NET framework helps your application be more robust. It also ensures that you can't forget to validate something and inadvertently allow bad data into the database. All right, so they're talking now next about a validation error that we may end up getting. So let's go back to the program. Let's do one more save all, and let's do a build solution. And then let's run the application. I'm on page 5 of the handout. I'm just following the instructions as they're given. So we're told that once this comes up, we are to iterate over to the movie's URL. So I will go over to movies. All right, this is very familiar to us by now. There it is. And fill out the form with some invalid values. As soon as jQuery client-side validation detects the error, it displays the associated error messages. So let's click Create New, and we'll come in here. And for the title, we're supposed to put Go. For the release date, I'm not going to put in anything. You can immediately see it must be a minimum of 3 and a maximum of 60. So if we kept going, you notice how that changes. But if we do keep going and going and going, again, we have now exceeded the 60. So you can see all that. All right. For the genre, if we leave it blank. For the price, if we put in, I believe we said it must be between 1 and 100. And the rating must be a string with a maximum length of 5. So they have you put in probably G. And you click Go, and you can see the associated errors. The only one I'm not getting is the genre field should have been required, and for some reason, it did not pick up that change. I'm going to leave it the way it is, though. Okay? Now, they do mention in the write-up, let's just go back to the list, so I'm not going to put that record. Shouldn't be in there. That's okay. All right. Going back to the write-up, which is here. Okay, so we saw that error. We saw all that. To support jQuery validation for non-English, we don't care about that because we are English and the stuff is naturally supported. So I'm on the middle of page 7. Notice how the form has automatically used a red border color to highlight the text boxes that contain invalid data and has omitted an appropriate validation error message next to each one of the errors. The errors are enforced both client-side and server-side, and you need to do both. You want to do the client-side because ideally you'll find it on the client, but it will only find it if JavaScript has been enabled on the client. So if we have these errors and JavaScript has, repeat HAS, has been is enabled on the client, we'll get those errors. But just in case it's been disabled on the browser and it gets sent to the server anyway, we're running the same checks, and that's normally how it happens. Now, a benefit of this, as mentioned here, is we didn't need to change a single line of code in the movie's controller class or in the create.cs HTML in order to enable this validation to work. The controller and views we used earlier in the tutorial automatically picked up the validation rules. So that's good news. As always, the more code you don't have to rewrite, the better off you're going to be. All right, the form data is not sent to the server until there are no client-side validation errors. And they tell you if you want, you can check that by putting a breakpoint in there. I'm not going to do that. All right. So you saw these kind, except, again, I don't have the genre for whatever reason. All right. Page 9 of this particular article. How validation occurs in the create view and create action methods. The author says here, you might wonder how the validation user interface was generated without any updates to the code in the controller or views. The next listing shows what the create methods in the movie view controller class look like. They are unchanged from how you created them earlier in the tutorial. So they're shown right here. I'm just going to leave this up. The first HTTP GET create version displays the initial create form. The second one, which is what we see here, displays the form post. The second create method, the post version, calls the model state.isValid method to check whether the movie has any validation errors. Calling this method evaluates any validation attributes that have been applied to the object. If an object has validation errors, the create method redisplays the form. If there are no errors, the method saves the new movie in the database. In our movie example, the form is not posted to the server when there are validation errors detected on the client side. The second create method is never called. If you disable JavaScript in the browser, client validation is disabled, and the post create method calls the is valid method to check whether the movie has any validation errors. Again, I'm just going to hold off on even doing that one. And again, they say you can set a breakpoint in there to verify that it's never called. Again, I'm not going to do that. You still get the full validation without JavaScript. The following image that's in there, they go through how you can go in and disable JavaScript both in IE and how you can do it in Firefox, and I believe also how you can do it in Chrome. All right, that gets us to page 14 of this article, and it says below is the create.cshtml view template that we scaffolded earlier in the tutorial. It's used by the action methods shown above both to display the initial form and redisplay it in the event of an error. Okay, and they mention, notice how the code uses the HTML editor 4 to output the input element for each movie property. Next to this helper is a call to the validation message. These two helper methods work with the model object that's passed by the controller to the view, in this case, the movie object. They automatically look for validation attributes specified on the model and display the appropriate error messages, if there are any. What's nice about this approach is that neither the controller nor the create view template knows anything about the actual validation rules being enforced. Don't know, don't care. The validation rules and error strings are specified only in the movie class. These same validation rules are automatically applied to the edit view and any other view templates you might create. If you want to change the validation logic later, you can do so in exactly one place by adding validation attributes to the model, as we did before. So I should really check back in that. I'm going to close this, and I can close this. But back in here, I should check and see. I don't see where I put anything in there for the genre, where it was required, genre, just to get set. Oh, we've got required here, so I'm not sure why it's not picking that up. But for whatever reason, it's not picking that up. All right. All right. So we're told I'm on the bottom of page 15 out of the 17 pages in this particular article. And on the bottom of this page, the author says, open the movie.cs file and examine the movie class. Well, that's what we have up. The system.component.data annotation namespace that we see up here provides formatting attributes in addition to the built-in set of validation attributes. We've already applied the enumeration value to the release date and the price field. The following shows the associated properties. The data type attributes only provide hints for the view engine to format the data. You can use the regular expression attribute to validate the format of the data. The data type attribute is used to specify a data type that is more specific than the database intrinsic type. Data type.date does not specify the format for the date as it's being displayed. By default, it's displayed according to the default format based on the server's culture information. The apply format in edit mode setting specifies the specified format should also be used or be applied when the value is displayed in a text box for editing. you might not want that for some fields. For example, if it's a currency field, you might not want the dollar sign to show, commas to show, etc. You can use the display format attribute by itself, but it's generally a good idea to use the data type attribute also. And they talk about the benefits you get from this on the bottom of page 16 and the top of page 17. First benefit, the browser can enable HTML5 features. Example, a calendar control. Second, by default, the browser will render data using the correct format based on the current locale. And third, on the top of page 17, the data type attribute can enable MVC to choose the right field template to render the data. If you use the data type attribute with a date field, you have to specify the display format attribute also in order to ensure that the field renders correctly in Chrome browsers. And they do mention there is something that you can read on that. And they say if you want to see that, you can go look on the Stack Overflow thread that's shown, that I'm highlighting around with the mouse pointer. All right. jQuery validation does not work with the range attribute and date time. You'll need to disable jQuery date validation to use the range attribute with date time. It's generally not a good practice to compile hard dates into your model, so using the range attribute and date time is discouraged. So they show on the bottom here how you can combine all that stuff together. In the last article that we'll go through in just a moment, as you can see, all that's left is examining the details and delete methods. So we'll review the application, make some improvements to automatically generate details and delete methods. So we'll go through that, and it's very short. It's 6 pages, I believe, 7 pages. And it's the last article we have to go through. So I will be going through that last bonus MVC, bonus 2 MVC article video in just a moment.